I really hope you have enough time. But for now, we'll have another lecture about community building or community planning. And it will be presented to you by Vytautas Ratkevičius, who is director of Užupis Green Cluster. So, welcome Vytautas, please applause.
Hey guys, how are you? My name is Vytautas. It's nice to have you here. Okay, thank you. Today I'm going to try to talk about community building, actually about community management. Before we start this, I just try to make some little remark. The guys in the market have more than 70 million or whatever, 70 million users. It's a huge country. It's bigger than Britain. It's a huge community, and we need to know how to get into the community and how to manage and how to understand what the community is and what they do and how they do it. And today we're going to try to squeeze around 160 hours of lecturing in 1 hour. 160 in 1 hour, and trying to make a little sense, keeping in mind that it's Friday. Already. Okay. Community of game or community of your product is one of the biggest support and one of the biggest assets. And it's very important to know what is there, what kind of community, what they have, how they have, what they do, where they do it, and why they're together. And we start from a short overview what's the community and how to manage, how to understand what kind of assets of community you have. First of all, if you want to have community or already build community, and you try to map and to understand what you would like to build, try to identify the purpose of this community, why this community is built. Why I am in there? Who I am building for? I would like to ask anybody of you of any of your communities an example how you see within your communities and why it was built. Communities or sectors or actually from our case we can ask, do you have community out there or developers? We have community and we're building for a particular purpose, and especially right now it's very interesting to build a community for the purpose of monetization and for loyalty. And they're going to try to understand how it works community on a simple example. Anybody know what is the Užupis? Can you raise the hand who's heard about Užupis? Can you make a noise about who heard about Užupis? And raise their hands. Okay, good. And Užupis community is a particular place. It's like game. And to understand what brings people together and how they are in this place, you must map it. What's the place is? What's the territory? And how is defined where they meet in this place? That's very important for the game. And who's now what the working community meeting? What's the working community meeting places? Anybody knows? Actually, I would like to ask you, if anybody give this example, I would like to give the present, if you don't mind. Is the teachers those who can identify what's the War Games LT community meeting place? Yes? Second? Okay, probably it's good. It's yours. Okay, pay attention to what we're talking. Okay, next, before to build or already have an existing community, you need to have a profile of the community. What the members, the database of their social identity, and what kind of roles in this community. I go to flick through and we're going to listen a little bit on the subject from the guys from Harvard who is from the Christian make break before, well, you need to identify what kind of roles your community have. Or anybody can say what kind of roles your community have. I can ask as well as from. Can you have my is the builders, what kind of roles your community have? Do we have leaders? Do we have policies? Do we have
Well, I was talking about the community itself, not community management. The community itself.
yes. But I'm trying to manage, trying to understand what kind of roles your community
Well, we are making research on that all the time now, so we understand that only a small part of our community are actually contributing to the game. So we know that there's contributors, guys who constantly create content and give it away. There's mentors who try to educate others, to invite new players and stuff. And there's, of course, community opinion makers, the guys who are trying to change the minds of others. And I guess these three, well, I won't talk about whiners and those guys who are not so sure, they're not very interested. But speaking of the main people, I'd say mentors, opinion makers, and contributors are important.
Okay, super, thanks. And what's to go into the community, try to understand how it's supposed to matter. What's the leaders of this community? And we have most of the time, it's very important to identify the official leaders and unofficial leaders. It's one of the important things. For example, I want to tell which countries community leaders in the war game. We met recently and they said, oh, we are a leader, we can go for the business together. But then you ask some guy who is the best player. Officially, the best player is just some way between the players. Another guy is their top guy in the distribution chain. And he said, oh, I need to ask some opinion. What he thinks about this. Okay, it's leaders, official, unofficial leaders. Lexicon and legends. Lexicon, each community has particular way of talking, which can make them recognize each other just with one word. For example, if I want to say low polygon modeling, anybody know what it is? Low polygon modeling? Okay, you don't know because nobody here working on games. Nobody developing the games, or maybe they don't often speak about this. And who knows what is low poly? They can recognize me from the distance because I've been doing this in Britain for nearly 10 years. And just if I heard somebody coffee shop, low poly modeling, I just grab it here and go to the table and say, okay, guy, I'm similar to you, I'm there. I have a lot to talk to you, and it's being part of the community. If you want to build a product, you must know how they're talking, what kind of lexicon, what kind of sound symbols they distribute around themselves. And of course, etiquette. Etiquette and set of rules according to which you are behaving in the particular community. And it makes community manageable and as well safe place. And of course, set of rules must be created by interesting people who's involved in the community. Like for example, in this case, we have constitution. Anybody heard about this constitution? Anybody heard? Oh, you do. Sorry, it's no politicians anymore. You can ask Yuri later on. Okay, and the constitution or etiquette of the community, which allows you to know exactly and not afraid by knowing what I can do in this group. And for example, now I feel quite safe here, and I can say, oh, guys, it's a real diet. Or just say, what is that? And nobody wants to learn. There's nobody is not attend to you because these are rules, relax, Friday night. And just a couple of hours ago, I was doing some little lecture in university. I just tried to imagine you were going to say this. I think the rules, it's very, very important. And etiquette, what we can do together. Sucrose. Sucrose is one of the feats of community and growth level or area of growth of the community. Symbols. It's again like you were mentioning about some symbols. Some symbols, we can go for the symbols which can be recognizable from the distance and unite the community in sort of conscious and conscious. And of course, the capability to empower your community and to see how you can empower. Because you see this graphic to manage the community takes quite a lot of time and money. It's good to empower the community to do this themselves, and they can roll in. Okay. Or anybody can tell me what you see here? What is that? What's the picture? It's the map. What's that? It's community map. It's right. It's the community map of our Alaska. Is the people who's connected in the community. It's a roadmap, or I can say topology, or a picture, digitized picture of our relationship. And you see some of the nodes is connected to each other. Is the person connected to another person? Some of the persons is connected to the hundreds of another person. Some of them connected to their hundreds and maybe just 2 or 3. And what's happening for us? Why it's important for us? Because they're disconnectors. It's called tipping point personalities. It's the personalities whose makes for community one way or another. And if you want to find a relationship in the community, first of all, you need to identify tipping point personality, because it's trendsetters who is allowed the innovation or the products by their opinion to come into the community and start circulating. Just interesting, the guys who all the facts are, you have methodology to identify trendsetters or disconnectors.
Well, yes and no. Right now we are using some steps from our forums to understand the people of, for example, opinion makers or contributors, so we call it. But we have to understand that this part of the community forums is very small compared to the whole community. So probably we cannot map the whole community. We won't be able to do it because it's inside the game. If the game is good, people are playing the game. They're inside, and you cannot follow them in their communications. All at least it's very hard for our business intelligence to do so. But unfortunately, yes, we are using statistics. We are working with programs like Resonata. If online is using it too, or for Russian content, we are using April. That's another linguistic analyzation program. So there's tools on the market, you can use it. There's just statistics you can analyze from a simple formula. And if you are trying to link these statistics to your game accounts, you will be able to understand if these guys who are participating on the forum, if they are active in the game, how many levels they have, how good they are in the game, and so on.
And why we was concentrating quite a lot of community and centers of tipping point personality, because in the book, Mr. Laszlo was doing research in the Hollywood, and he had mapped the community and how the trends and moving in the community of Hollywood, and he made their discovery. The habit of buying Ferrari is influenced by just 5 people in all of Hollywood. And a lot of things become clearer. Or I'm going to buy a game, or an old game, or an update, or or whatever. The question is, or the guy who is the economic community on the top of the pyramid, how he's communicate to me and what his opinion on that action. And after mapping our community, for example, in our cluster, according to this digital methodology, which we developed, we discovered this whole infrastructure of the roles and influence levels of influence, which is trendsetters, the leaders, is veterans, administrators, lower, as members, is temporary members, west, sectors, neutral members, and this was most interesting and most important for the community, it's the enemies. I'm pretty sure why. Because if somebody, hardcore guy, is going to be asked from the people from Farmville and said, okay, can we get together and we want to play together? I think there's going to be a lot of love and connection to this guy and it will forever. But it's encouraged other people to look differently and to try to be in the one perfect or another. And like I mentioned, the guy, Nicholas Christakis from the Harvard Medical School, medical sociology and medical school, he discovered particular way how the leaders and the other part of the community communicating. And he discovered very interesting things which I'd like to look yourself in his explanation because it's very interesting. In Lithuania, like we spoke recently with the mayor of Vilnius, Artūras Zuokas, and I was okay, you are community leaders. What you do, what you say to make the rest of the people start listening, or if you want to push some project, just in what community, in the Lithuanian community, you need to say, Estonians already done this. Estonian done this. And I thought, okay, it's maybe a good idea to check why is it happening like this. It's happening because it's particular culture, particular ecosystem in Lithuania. And it's even having some saying. Tu nebūsi niekada savo kaime pranašas. It's mean, if you want to deliver the message, it's better to do from the words of outsider, of somebody from outside leading, outside leader. And so it's a good idea to deliver a message about community management and induction, emotional induction from the lips of some Harvard professor, because you're studying. And I'd like to listen to that.
The University of Chicago. And I was seeing there are people who were dying and their families in the south side of Chicago.
And I was observing what happened to people and their families over the course of their terminal illness. And in my lab, I was studying the widower effect, which is a very old idea in the social sciences, going back 150 years, known as dying of a broken heart. So when I die, my wife's risk of death can double, for instance, in the first year. And I had gone to take care of one particular patient, a woman who was dying of dementia. And in this case, unlike this couple, she was being cared for by her daughter. And the daughter was exhausted from caring for her mother. And the daughter's husband, he also was sick from his wife's exhaustion. And I was driving home one day and I get a phone call from the husband's friend, calling me because he was depressed about what was happening to his friend. So here I get this call from this random guy that's having an experience that's being influenced by people at some social distance. And so I suddenly realized two very simple things. First, the widowhood effect was not restricted to husbands and wives. And second, it was not restricted to pairs of people. And I started to see the world in a whole new way, like pairs of people connected to each other. And then I realized that these individuals would be connected into foursomes with other pairs of people nearby. And that in fact, these people were embedded in other sorts of relationships, marriage and spousal and friendship and other sorts of ties. And that in fact, these connections were vast. And that we were all embedded in this broad set of connections with each other. So I started to see the world in a completely new way, and I became obsessed with this. I became obsessed with how it might be that we're embedded in these social networks and how they affect our lives. So social networks are these intricate things of beauty, and they are so elaborate and so complex and so ubiquitous, in fact, that one has to ask what purpose they serve. Why are we embedded in social networks? I mean, how do they form? How do they operate? And how do they affect us? And so my first topic with respect to this was not death, but obesity. And it had become trendy to speak about the obesity epidemic. And along with my collaborator, James Fowler, we began to wonder whether obesity really was epidemic, and could it spread from person to person like the 4 people I discussed earlier. So this is a slide of some of our initial results. It's 2,200 people in the year 2000. Every dot is a person. We make the dot size proportional to people's body size. So bigger dots are bigger people. And in addition, if your body size, if your BMI, your body mass index, is above 30, if you're clinically obese, we also color the dots yellow. So if you look at this image right away, you might be able to see that there are clusters of obese and non-obese people in the image. But the visual complexity is still very high. It's not obvious exactly what's going on. In addition, some questions are immediately raised. How much clustering is there? Is there more clustering than would be due to chance alone? How big are the clusters? How far do they reach? And most importantly, what causes the clusters? So we did some mathematics to study the size of these clusters. This here shows on the y-axis the increase in the probability that a person is obese given that a social contact of theirs is obese. And on the x-axis, the degrees of separation between the 2 people. And on the far left, you see the purple line. It says that if your friends are obese, your risk of obesity is 45% higher. And the next bar over, the orange line, says if your friends' friends are obese, your risk of obesity is 25% higher. And then the next line over says if your friend's friend's friend, someone you probably don't even know, is obese, your risk of obesity is 10% higher. And it's only when you get to your friends' 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 friends that there's no longer a relationship between that person's body size and your own body size. Well, what might be causing this clustering? There are at least 3 possibilities. One possibility is that as I gain weight, it causes you to gain weight, a kind of induction, a kind of spread from person to person. Another possibility, very obvious, is homophily, or birds of a feather flock together. Here, I form my tie to you because you and I share a similar body size. And the last possibility is what is known as confounding, because it confounds our ability to figure out what's going on. And here the idea is not that my weight gain is causing your weight gain, nor that I preferentially form a tie with you because you and I share the same body size, but rather that we share a common exposure to something like a health club that makes us both lose weight at the same time. And when we studied these data, we found evidence for all of these things, including for induction. And we found that if your friend becomes obese, it increases your risk of obesity by about 57% in the same given time period. And there can be many mechanisms for this effect. One possibility is that your friends say to you something like, they adopt a behavior that spreads to you, like they say, let's go have muffins and beer, which is a terrible combination. But you adopt that combination, and then you start gaining weight like them. And another more subtle possibility is that they start gaining weight, and it changes your ideas of what an acceptable body size is. And here, what's spreading from person to person is not a behavior, but rather a norm. An idea is spreading. Now, headline writers had a field day with our studies. I think the headline in the New York Times was, are you packing it on? Blame your fat friends. What was interesting to us is the European headline writers had a different take. They said, are your friends gaining weight? Perhaps you are to blame. And we thought this was a very interesting comment on American, kind of self-serving, not my responsibility kind of phenomenon. Now, I want to be very clear, we do not think our work should or could justify prejudice against people of one or another body size at all. Now, our next question was, could we actually visualize this spread? Was weight gain in one person actually spreading to weight gain in another person? And this is complicated because we needed to take into account the fact that the network structure, the architecture of the ties, was changing across time. And in addition, because obesity is not a unicentric epidemic, there's not like a patient zero of the obesity epidemic. We find that guy, there was a spread of obesity out from him. It's a multicentric epidemic. Lots of people are doing things at the same time. And I'm about to show you a 30-second video animation that took me 5 years, me and James, 5 years of our lives to do. And so again, every dot is a person, every tie between them is a relationship. And we're going to put this into motion now, taking daily cuts through the network for about 30 years. The dot sizes are going to grow. You're going to see a sea of yellow take over. You're going to see people be born and die. Dots will appear and disappear. Ties will form and break. Marriages will and divorces. Friendings and defriendings. A lot of complexity. A lot is happening just in these 30-year period that includes the obesity epidemic. And by the end, you're going to see clusters of obese and non-obese individuals within the network. Now, when I looked at this, it changed the way I see things. Because this network that's changing across time has a memory, it moves, things flow within it, it has a kind of consistency. People can die, but it doesn't die, it still persists. And it has a kind of resilience that allows it to persist across time. And so I came to see these kinds of social networks as living things. As living things that we could put under a kind of microscope and study and analyze and understand. And we used a variety of techniques to do this, and we started exploring all kinds of other phenomena. So we looked at smoking and drinking behavior, and voting behavior, and divorce, which can spread, and altruism. And eventually we became interested in emotions. Now, when we have emotions, we show them. Why do we show our emotions? I mean, there would be an advantage to experiencing our emotions inside, anger or happiness. But we don't just experience them, we show them. And not only do we show them, but others can read them. And not only can they read them, but they copy them. There's emotional contagion that takes place in the populations.
They are talking about how I understood if I am getting weight, you is really getting weight too, because they know some of each other, and their friend or their friend getting weight. It's mean induction and communication of vertical attitudes or idea is going through the network. Just try to see from another side. Okay, if somebody starts playing their board games, this means if you plays the board game, my probability to play the board game as well becoming 50% higher. And it's very interesting. It's giga powerful marketing or whatever idea strategy tool. The question is how it's happening. How it's happening, what kind of things happening, and what we need to do to spread this. And we try to map a little bit, forgive me, community in Lithuania of board games, and try to have the leaders what kind of attitude is real. And they are older than 13, they are well fit, they're very intelligent, and most of them quite rich. But they don't spend lots of money on, I'm talking about leaders, about different point personalities. We were trying to have 5 guys. And they don't spread idea about spending lots of money on their buying new stuff. And we decided, okay, let's try to ask guys, because we don't have the statistics. Our assumption in the Lithuanian monetization in the board games is not the best in the light of computer communities. What about how is Lithuanian monetization? How they buying?
Well, I'm not the person for this position.
Okay, we will ask later the people, because their idea of the leaders already there. They're transmitting vertical idea, and I think we need to change a little bit the way and what kind of attitudes is going to be spread. Okay, and which way this idea is spreading, by which channels is happening. I'm going to take another guy who's going to explain how this works. And we'll ask you to make some notes. What kind of idea we're going to try to
fail. One summer, just for fun summer reading, my grandmother suggested I read this book called The Tipping Point. And I loved the book. I thought it was really cool and interesting. And the coolest thing about it was it wasn't just one science, it was a mix of sciences. It was a mix of sociology and psychology and a little bit of marketing, all in between. And I thought the topic was really interesting, but I actually sent a note to Malcolm Gladwell at the time saying, hey, is there more research or more ideas that we could read about behind these topics? And you know, he said, in case it was true, there wasn't actually that much. We didn't really know why people talk about or share certain things rather than others, and we didn't really know why that leads things to become popular. So one of the things people do a lot is talk. Well, we talk to our friends, we share stories with our neighbors, we gossip with coworkers around the water cooler. And these social talk moments, or word of mouth, have a big impact on behavior. So what we buy, what restaurants we try, what movie we go to. Think about the last book you read, for example. How'd you find out about that book? You probably found out about it from one of your friends or one of your colleagues. So we know we talk, and we know that talking has a big impact on what we buy and what we do, but we know a lot less about why we talk about some things rather than others. So this book is really a research-based look at why people talk.
Okay, there are things which is based on a contagious message. This was a map as well, and it was breaking into six categories. One of them is social currency, and in the social currency, which I explained, and with a little task to be verified, just to try to identify what kind of social currency do you have, or what kind of social currency you can identify by studying just our little community here. Just spotted what kind of currency we have and how it looks.
So social currency is the idea that we talk about influences how people see us. So just like the clothes we wear and the cars we drive, the things we say influence whether people think we're cool and interesting or dumb and boring, whether we're smart and in the know or not really someone they'd like to talk to. And so if you think about it, you know, if we say a lot about new restaurants, or we always seem to know about the hottest new movies or new technology, people might think we're a foodie or we're really into the movie industry. If we talk a lot about, you know, pets, people think we have a lot of knowledge in that domain. So what we say influences how people see us. It's a kind of currency. Just like money can buy us things, the clothes we wear, or the things we say are a kind of currency. They influence whether or not people want to be around us, whether or not they want to invite us to parties, and whether or not we're going to get invited back to that second date. For something to be remarkable, it means that it's worthy of remark, whether it's surprising or interesting or novel. You know, think about the last piece of information you passed on, or the last story you told someone. It probably wasn't just about what you had for breakfast or what you did on a given day. You probably passed along something that was worthy of remark, something that was surprising or different that happened about a particular day, or a story that they wouldn't have guessed the ending to. And so things are remarkable because they violate our expectations in some way.
So novel and interesting that you always have.
Question for you. Just try to identify what kind of stuff, social currency you get, what kind of things people have, which you can memorize and be different. Just to look around where it's possible to spot. Then you can put on a piece of paper. Okay. It's Friday night, Friday night. Okay, let's move on.
Triggers are like
Environmental reminders for products and ideas. The idea is we see, hear, or smell things in our environment, right, remind us of other things. So we, for example, see vitamins on the kitchen counter, it reminds us to take our vitamins. We hear a song on the radio, it reminds us of a friend who likes that particular song. Or we smell freshly baked cookies and it reminds us of, you know, these really great oatmeal bars our grandma might have used to make. And so even though we didn't see those particular things, the environment triggered us to think about them. And so triggers can also drive word of mouth, right? If you see something that reminds you of something else, that makes people more likely to talk about and share that information. So one of my favorite examples of triggers is Rebecca Black. So a couple years ago I was teaching a group of executives, and one person, you know, tentatively raised their hand. They said, look, Professor Berger, I think your framework is great, but if it can't explain Rebecca Black, it's not worth anything. How does your framework explain Rebecca Black? And so I thought about it for a minute, and now I think I actually have an answer to share. So Rebecca Black was one of the most popular songs. Her song was one of the most popular songs of 2011. It's a song called Friday. It's all about her waking up and figuring out what breakfast cereal to eat. And dealing with those big teen decisions about whether to sit in the front seat or the back seat of her friend's car. It's a pretty bad song. In fact, some people have labeled it as the worst song of all time, which in itself would be an achievement. But if the song is so bad, why did it get 300 million views? Why did so many people talk about and share this particular piece of online content? And one interesting fact that we talk about in the book, if you look at the search traffic for Rebecca Black's song, it gives you some insight into what's going on. So that song is bad every day of the week. It's not particularly good on one day versus another. But every Friday, there's a spike in search traffic for her song. Right? Every Friday is a ready trigger in the environment to remind people to think about, to search for, and to share that song. And so one reason that song succeeded is because it was triggered frequently by the environment. Yes, it was terrible, but every Friday was a trigger to remind people about the song and talk about it.
Okay, the idea of the triggers is quite interesting. It's, I was listening myself, if I ever heard the Rebecca Black. And what do you think of this one? Why it's so high? Just because it's have some triggers from our archetypal or internal memory about our everyday life, because every Friday is the day when we go somewhere and we just relax. And why everybody listen about the blah things and they enjoy it because she's singing about Fridays, happy night, happy dream, or happy life. Okay, let's go. Emotional side about the message. Emotional is that how
people to talk about and share things is emotion. Very simply, when we care, we share. The more we feel about something, if we feel happy or excited, or even if we feel some negative emotions like anger and anxiety. There's too much content online to read all the articles in the New York Times or watch all the videos on YouTube. And so one shortcut we use is well, what did other people like, right? If other people found something worth sharing, it's probably worth us checking out too. So most people, rather than scanning the Times, for example, they look for the most emailed list as a way to figure out what content they should look at. But why then do some articles make that list rather than others? What makes certain content more likely to be shared? And so a couple years ago, I got interested in this question. This was a little bit before most emailed lists were a big thing. And so at the time, I would take my scissors and I would go to the library and I would clip out every day the articles. The Wall Street Journal had a nice little piece every day about the articles that had been most emailed the prior day. I'd clip that out and I'd take it back to my office. And I had a big stack of sort of which articles had been most emailed. And I looked through them trying to find common patterns. It was really hard to do, but luckily we figured out a better way to do it. So we went and we used a web crawler to scrape all the articles written by the New York Times for 6 months. So you might think, for example, that what makes content shared? Well, maybe positive emotion is shared more than negative emotion, right? So why might we share things? Well, if we're really excited about it or something positive happens, like we get a raise or we get a promotion, we're going to talk about it and share that. Negative things we're not going to share, right? If our child gets a C rather than an A, we're not going to pass that on. If we get fired rather than promoted, it's not really worth sharing to others. But we actually found, yes, positive things are shared more than negative ones, but some negative emotions can actually be shared. So things like anger and anxiety, for example, are highly shared even though they're very negative. Why might that be? And so what we found is the answer is not just about positive or negative. We share positive things and we avoid sharing negative ones, but it's really about the arousal or activation that emotion evokes. If we think about anger versus sadness, for example, or on the positive side, things like excitement or amusement drive people to talk and to share. They activate people, they activate them to take an action, and one of those actions is sharing. One story that really helps us see how emotion works is a story that happened to me a couple of years ago. So I'm an avid cyclist. I was biking one winter through Philadelphia when I noticed a dog running around part of the park. And then I noticed that the dog was actually by itself. So I pulled my bike over thinking I would pick up my cell phone and call the number on its tag and help it find its owner. But unfortunately, when I went over to the dog, it was a really happy dog, jumping up, panting, licking my hands. The dog didn't have a collar on it. And actually, when I looked more closely, the dog had sores on its body. It had basically been abandoned. Someone had left this dog in the park to fend for itself. And so with the help of a friend, I took the dog in, I gave the dog food, I got it its shots, but unfortunately neither of us could take the dog. We couldn't adopt the dog. We had to find someone else to take the dog. So I sent an email out to all my friends saying, hey, do you know anybody who might want a dog? Good thing, the story has a happy ending. Somebody actually adopted the dog. It ended up finding a happy home. But it wasn't anyone I sent the email to, and it wasn't anyone I sent the email to who sent it to. It was actually a third degree of separation. Someone sent the email to someone else who sent it to someone else who eventually adopted the dog. Now, that's a great story. This dog got adopted. But think about if the same thing would have happened if I was getting rid of a couch. So if I sent an email out that said, hey, free couch, you know, here, come and get it, right? If you think about it, the dog story got shared more because it has much more emotion. We care about that dog. We feel for the dog. We want it to get a new home. We want it to get adopted. And so because of that, because we care,
We share that information, pass it on.
Jeigu pasižiūrėt, po žaidimo titrų, tai ten istorijas,
The idea behind public is really simple. Think about the last time you were in a foreign city trying to figure out where to go for dinner, right? You didn't know much about the different restaurants in the area, but you needed a place to eat. How do you figure out where to go? And one of the most tried and tested rules is you look for a place that's busy. First of all, when others are doing something, we think it's a pretty good idea. When we're not sure about what restaurant to try, we look to what others are doing and assume that if they're doing it, it must be good. If the restaurant's full, it must be tasty. If the restaurant's empty, it must not be very good. But if we can't see what others are doing, we can't imitate them. And so the phrase monkey see, monkey do has really important things in it, right? It doesn't just say that we imitate others, it says that we have to see what others are doing to be able to imitate it. And that's the idea of public. The more public or something is, or the more observable someone else's behavior is, the easier it is to imitate. If we can see what others are doing, we can imitate it, but if we can't see what they're doing, we can't do the same thing. Think back 10, 15 years ago when we used to have Discmen, right, is the way people listen to their music. So they'd carry around music on CDs and they'd play it through Discman. And then new technology came out, right, the MP3 player. And it was a big deal, right, this notion that you don't have to carry CDs, that you can put your music on a digital file. But people weren't really sure if that product would catch on, right? They weren't sure, was it worth investing money in this new device? And there are also just so many companies around making the device, right? There was Rovio and Roxio and Microsoft and Apple. It was really hard to know which standard was going to catch on, which was the right one to invest in. But looking around to others is one way that people help figure out what to do. And so back then, if you looked around, let's say on the subway, for example, on the bus to work, and you looked around at what player people were using, you couldn't really tell, right? Whether someone was using a Sony player or a Microsoft player, everyone had darkly colored headphones, right? All the headphones were black. It's hard to know what other people were using, and hard to then use their choice as an information for your own choice. Apple did something very simple. They made their headphones white. Right? Now, suddenly you right away knew how many other people were using that product. By looking around and counting the number of white headphones on the bus or subway, you could see how popular the product was, and if it was popular, get some evidence that it was probably good for you as well. And that's the idea of social proof, right? If other people are doing something, it's probably good for you as well. And so something as simple as making that color of the headphones easier for people to see, making it more public, made it more likely to catch on and become popular. Another reason people share things is because they have practical value. Very simply, practical value is just about useful content or information. Websites that have particularly good travel deals, places you can save money on something, ways that you can live healthier, better, more fulfilling lives. And the reason we share useful content is really we want to help others, right? We used to do things like barn raisings, right? Where people lived in communities of others. They would get together and help their neighbors by raising a barn, getting together to really work together to help their neighbor. There's not really as many opportunities to help each other in today's day and age, right? We work in cubicles, we don't see our friends as often, we live further away from our family members as we once did, but sharing things is a way that we can still be useful and helpful to others. One really good example of sharing practical value is the story of a guy named Ken Craig. So Ken is 86 years old, he doesn't have an email address, he doesn't really make online content, he doesn't have a Twitter account, he's not on Facebook, but he actually made a video that got 6 million views. And the video, very, very basically, is about corn. Now, why would 6 million people watch or share a video about corn? Well, Ken's video is useful information, right? He shows you, if you think about corn, corn has two problems. It gets stuck in your teeth, but also has that annoying stuff called silks on the side, right? Those little threads that you can never seem to get off. Ken figured out a way, a secret, a tip to getting rid of silks, right? Toss an ear of corn in the microwave for 4 minutes, cut off the bottom 1/4 inch, hold the husk, and out drops the corn clean, right? No silks at all. And so this information is useful, and because of that, people passed it on. So one type of practically valuable content people share is good deals. Money off something or 2 for 1. But one important question is what makes a particular thing seem like a really good deal? There's so many deals out there. 10% off this, 20% off that. What makes a particular deal worth sharing? And so one thing that makes a deal worth sharing is something I call the rule of 100. Think about a product, let's say a $20 shirt. So if that shirt is 25% off, it could also be $5 off, right? 25% off 20 is the same as $5 off. But if you think about it, those two deals don't seem equally good. 25% off the shirt actually seems like a much better deal than $5 off the shirt. And in fact, when you give people an experiment one of those two deals, more people are excited about the deal when it's 25% off. At the same time, though, if you think about something like a $2,000 laptop, there money off seems better than percentage off. So 10% off a $2,000 laptop would be $200 off, but $200 there seems better than 10%. And so a simple way to think about whether a deal is better when it's a percentage off or money off is the rule of 100. If something is less than $100, then the percentage off is going to seem better. Whether it's more than $100, the money off is going to seem better. And so using that break point of 100, the rule of 100, helps you think about whether a percentage discount versus a money discount is going to make better.
Now, when you think about get public, or maybe somebody can say, in this area, or anybody working, that some special social agreements that they tell us. Or anybody have any special feature, like white or earphones, Apple have, to make it different. Or they would have. And your innovation, or what you're trying to do today, and what you're trying to do over the 2 weeks, and to try to innovate what kind of signals or symbols is possible to create in the public space, for example, for the workings. And this is going to be triggers, it's going to be stories, and the hacking, like most of the people do hacks and creating the apps. In another case, we was trying to experiment and try to hack a different area. We will move out of the creating just software, creating different models or different triggers to create particular innovation in the way of public opinion, public appearance, emotional communication, leadership programs, and last but not least is the story.
A good way to think about it.
Behind the stories chapter is to think about the famous story of the Trojan horse. It's a really famous story. It's been told from generation to generation about how the Greeks hid warriors inside a wooden horse that then got snuck inside the walls of Troy and helped the Greeks win the war. That story is a great story. It has lots of vivid details. Someone stole someone else's wife, famous heroes battling back and forth for decades upon decades. Great, great story. But inside that story is really a hidden message. Beware of Greeks bearing gifts. Stories are more trustworthy than advertising because we don't really believe what we hear in ads. So, ads often say 9 out of 10 dentists prefer this toothpaste, or 8 out of 10 doctors say that this is the best treatment. But we don't believe ads because we never hear an ad that says the opposite, right? Only 1 of 10 dentists like this toothpaste, or 8 out of 10 doctors said this is a terrible drug, don't take it. But because ads are never negative, right? They always say the product is great, fantastic, will whiten your teeth and clean your car. We're not going to believe ads, right? Our friends, on the other hand, are really objective. They're more likely to tell it to us how it is. And so we're much more likely to believe our friends and believe the stories our friends tell us, rather than ads, which are much more subjective. One example I like to talk about is the famous Subway story of Jared. Right? You can think about different ways to share information about Subway. So you could tell a friend, Subway has 5 subs under 5 grams of fat. But someone wouldn't just share that information for a couple reasons. One, it would be weird to share that information out of the blue. And 2, people like taking information and breaking it into broader stories. So people won't share that information by itself, but they'll love to tell the story of Jared, right? A guy who lost, hundreds of pounds by eating only Subway sandwiches. But along the way, some important information comes in that story, right? By learning that he lost all this weight eating Subway sandwiches, you learn that Subway actually has low-fat subs, right? You learn that a fast food restaurant can actually make you healthy. And you learn that by eating all those subs he lost that weight, well, they must have enough options that you can eat there a number of times and still be pretty happy. And so that story takes the same information, but because it's baked into a narrative, it's carried across.
And now we're trying to think what kind of storyline can be, and what kind of storyline is going to be embedded or part of their game, which is going to communicate in a different way. And of course, I think it's going to try to think through and get the last one. Okay, guys, let's take a break. Let's take a break. Thanks.